أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. We were discussing verse number 34 of Surah Nisa. We just discussed half of the verse, but I repeat the verse from the beginning and then we continue from where we left in our last session. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. Men are the managers of women because of the advantage Allah has granted some of them over others, and by virtue of their spending out of their wealth. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهِ. So righteous women are obedient, caretaking in the absence of their husbands of what Allah has enjoined them to guard. واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا. As for those whose misconduct you fear, advise them, and if ineffective, keep away from them in the bed, and as the last resort beat them. Then if they obey you, do not seek any course of action against them. Indeed, Allah is all exalted, all great. Now, we were discussing the term qanitat last week when, of course, we stopped because of the time. I said that qanit is someone who's consistently obedient. However, here, وَفَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِطَاتٌ, the righteous women are qanitat, consistently obedient, may convey several meanings. One is that they are qanitat to their Lord. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ. And with regards to their husbands, they protect the secrets of the family, what Allah has enjoined to be kept secret, for example. The other maybe qanitat is in relation to their husbands. Righteous women are obedient to their husbands, and of course they guard and they take care of what they have to guard in the absence of their husbands. Now, considering the context of the verse, this may be a better meaning. The righteous women are obedient to their husbands, and of course they hafidatun lil ghayb. However, the problem with this meaning is that Allah has not enjoined us to be unconditionally obedient to anyone except to Him, and of course to those who talk on His behalf, like the prophets and the imams. Otherwise, no one is unconditionally reliable in the sense that their commands could be right, completely right, so that we should obey them. Therefore, one may think, considering the context of the verse, that qanitat means they are obedient with regards to this enjoinment of Allah, that ar-rajal qawwamuna ala an-nisa. The righteous women accept this because, as I said before, a family is like a small community, and any community needs a head, needs someone to have the final say. After all, consultations, democracy, and whatever. And Allah has, for the reasons mentioned before, has arranged that men should be the qawwamun, and salihat are obedient to these ruling. This is a third meaning of qanitat. Now, whichever you may think fits better in the context of the verse, you may choose to be the meaning. And also with regards to حافظات للغيب. حافظات للغيب. Now we may say, as I said, قانتات is one quality which refers to relationship of the women to God, and حافظات للغيب may be another quality which refers to their relationship with their husbands. If we say قانتات is towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the context may accept this as well. However, let's see about the meaning of قانتات. حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله. What does it mean? What is the ghaib? The verse doesn't actually clarify or explain what should be protected by the wives when the husbands are not present. حافظات للغيب, when the husbands are not present, they protect it. Now, different views have been suggested for this. Like, for example, they guard their chastity, or protecting the personal information of their husbands. حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله. Looking after the house and wealth of their husbands. Again, this is what Allah wants to be protected. Or maintaining the dignity of themselves and their husbands in the absence of their husbands. Or concealing the secrets of their conjugal affair, which is a very courteous allusion. As we said before, the Quran usually uses such expressions, indirect expressions, to refer to sexual matters. So this may be that they would not speak about such things to others when their husbands is not present. Of course, in the presence of their husbands, they never would do that, but they have to keep that in the absence of their husbands as well. And especially when the women sit together and gossip, they may speak of such things. Allah forbids that and says this should not be something to be revealed to other people. Now, since the next part of the verse talks about those whose misconduct you fear, and then explains what to do with them, we may assume that there is an implied omitted expression here, which completes the sentence about the complying women. For example, as for those wives who are righteous and obedient, do good to them. Never ever be violent, never ever do anything which may displeases them. And as for those whose misconduct you fear, then the next stage is mentioned in the verse. وَاللَّاتِي تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ فَعِظُوهُنَّ وَاهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيًّا كَبِيرًا. As for those whose misconduct you fear, advise them, and if ineffective, keep away from them in the bed, and as the last resort, beat them. Then if they obey you, do not seek any course of action against them. Indeed, Allah is all exalted, all great. Now, what's the meaning of nushuz? This tahafuna, it means that your relationship reaches a stage where it is on the verge of nushuz, where you feel, so it doesn't mean that it has happened. It's a preventative measure rather than something which happens after the event. So تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ, if you fear, you expect that this happen, take certain measures that these should not happen, that nushuz should not happen. Now, what is nushuz? Literally, nushuz means to rise over something. it means elevation. Nashada min makanihi means elevated from its place. Also, Nashaz is a highland, is a high place. And in the Quran, in another verse also in Surah Mujadala, we have وَإِذَا قِيلَ انشُزُوا فَانشُزُوا, when it is when you are told rise up and give your place to others, then rise. So nushuz means to rise, and especially in this context, it means to rise over, to rebel in a sense. So when this nushuz is used about people, then it gives the meaning of to be non-compliant, stubborn, rough, rebellious. These are the meanings of the of nushuz, and it is used in the Quran for both men and women. Both women can have nushuz towards their husbands, and husbands can have nushuz towards their wives. In verse 128 of this surah, Surah Nisa, وَإِنْ امْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ بَعْلِهَا نُشُوزًا أَوْ إِعْرَاضًا. Again, this word khawf, وَاللَّاتِ تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ. إِذْ امْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ بَعْلِهَا. It means do not let things to get so sore that you cannot solve them anymore. Seek certain measures before things get to a very rough situation when you cannot resolve it at all. وَإِنْ امْرَأَةٌ, verse 128 of Surah An-Nisa, وَإِنْ امْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ بَعْلِهَا نُشُوزًا أَوْ إِعْرَاضًا فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا أَنْ يُصْلِحَا بَيْنَهُمَا صُلْحًا. If a wife, if a woman fears, expects that her husband commits nushuz or i'raz, or leaving her hanging, just doesn't pay any attention to her, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا أَنْ يُصْلِحَا بَيْنَهُمَا صُلْحًا. There is no sin upon them to make a compromise, and that means the woman can actually propose for divorce. This is what the meaning of the verse is, by giving back the mahr or things like that. So, وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ, this is better. The nushuz of mar'a, the commentators have said that نَشَزَتِ الْمَرْأَ مِنْ زَوْجَهَا means أَسَدْ زَوْجَهَا وَامْتَنَعَتْ عَلَيْهِ. It means disobeyed and did not comply with what she should have complied. And نَشَزَ الرَّجُلْ مِنْ امْرَأَتِهِ, what is the meaning of a man having nushuz? تَرَكَهَا وَجَفَاهَا, abandoning his wife and being rough to the wife. These are the meaning of nushuz for men. So it has two different meanings for men and women. Now, considering the meaning of nushuz here, it means those women who seek ascendancy, who rise against their husbands, who did not comply with the duties that they have in marital life. Do not divorce them just suddenly, just because you're displeased. Do not separate from each other. Seek certain measures. These measures are to prevent from divorce. So seek certain measures. Now, one thing that we have to bear in mind is that in the context of the revelation of the verse, what was very common and usual was the fact that husbands rushed to beat their wives for very small matters. If they were displeased with them in cooking, in cleaning the house, or even without any reason, they thought that they can do such things because they are husbands and they have the right. Now, the verse is very explicitly denying this right for the husbands. You have no right to beat your wife out of anger, out of pleasure, because you are not pleased with what they do, because we are not pleased with their cooking, cleaning, or things like that, because you're not pleased with their relations, with their families, so to speak. So these are not things that you are allowed to beat your wives for, as they used to do. In a sense, these measures is telling us that usually what happens in family, in rough relations in family, especially when the husband is rough, as soon as anything happens, they start beating their wives. And this is what they did in Arabia. And the verse says, this is not allowed. This is not allowed in any way. Now, in only one way, if there is a nushuz, that means the wife is not complying with her marital duties, and you expect that this would lead to divorce, then take these measures. When we say take these measures, it means that you cannot just out of anger, out of a sudden start beating your wife. This is not acceptable, and it is actually giving the hint that beating is not allowed. I mean, after all these, it is not something that you have to, you can. It's not something that you can do out of your desire and will. It is a measured, it should be a measured, calculated, premeditated course of action. What is that? Advise them. This means a sort of negotiation for a couple of days, couple of weeks. You see, what we understand from beating is that as soon as a man becomes angry, can beat their wives. The verse does not allow that. The verse is actually giving the opposite course of action. فَإِذُوهُنَّ. If this doesn't work, you see, it's a premeditated, measured course of action. وَاهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ. And keep away from them in the bed. Now, keep away from them in the bed may have two meanings. One is keep away from them in your common bed and sleep in another bed. And in effect, separate your bed from your wives. The other meaning is that just turn away, turn your back in the bed, turn your back from your wife. This is a better meaning, actually, going with the literal meaning of the verse, because it says وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ, not عَنِ الْمَضَاجِعِ. It doesn't say keep away from them from the bed. It says keep away from them in the bed. And this is, of course, a measure which is more likely to bring about conciliation in the relation. So you see, here the husband, as the head of the family, when they fear the misconduct, misbehavior, rebellion of the wife, they have to take certain measures. And these measures, initially it is a maw'izah, it is talking to them, trying to solve the problem by speaking together to each other. And then it's a psychological measure that the husband should take. And that is keeping away, whether from the bed or in the bed, turning away from her, and as the last resort, and beat them. Now, so what here is ruled out is that husband can, out of anger, out of whimsy, desire, out of any other reason, can beat their wives. It is not permissible. Actually, a crucial insight that we can gain from the narrations about the verse is the significance of the social and historical context of the time. Certain customs, like the custom in which the verses were revealed, were deeply rooted and firmly established in ascendancy of husbands over wives, even in beating and things like that. The verse is denying it. And in a sense, it wants to shift the whole idea and frame of understanding of men in the treatment of the women. Now, here beating can be what? Beating can be punching, breaking the bone, beating with a stick, beating by whatever which may hurt. So this beating must be defined, because it's a technical term used in the Quran. It must be defined by the Shari', by the Prophet, peace be upon him. This is what should happen, because like Salat, we are told to pray, but the definition of praying, the definition of official prayer, is something that the Prophet gives us. And also the definition of this beating is something that the Prophet and the Imams have outlined for us. So, for example, we have a hadith from Imam al-Raza and from the Prophet and other Aimma that keeping away from them means that the man would turn his back to his wife in bed, and beating should be by a sawak, this wood of Arak, which is a very soft wood, the wood with which they used to brush their teeth, and it should be lenient, not leaving any mark. So in a sense, it's again a sort of psychological gesture rather than beating in the sense that women are beaten with lots of marks on their faces or other parts of body. And if the mark is left, then the qisas is there. So the verse is actually intending to eliminate this type of behavior in society, in the community, especially the small community of wife and husband in family. Neither the Prophet nor the Imams ever used to beat their wives. And this shows that this verse is just to eliminate this. First of all, if you want to beat, okay, I don't say don't beat, but it shouldn't be out of anger. It should be measured, a measured plan to keep the family together. And if someone does these measures, it wouldn't lead to beating. And then, are these something that could continue, or they are one-off measures? Now, it's not a continuous sort of beating. It's not something that husbands have the right to do all the time. It's a one-off measure to keep the families together. After that, it's divorce. So, in a sense, it's to keep the family together. Now, the question which arises from this discussion is, does Islam endorse domestic violence? Is this not domestic violence? The verse negates beating women out of anger, revenge, or stupidity, which most men do. And these are the roots of domestic violence. None of the three measures mentioned in the verse can be continuous. They are rather offered as one-off measure, as I mentioned, to keep the family together. And given the greater evil of divorce, then one may say that if this works, it may be a better solution. Now, I would like to read for you from Tafsir al-Manar what Rashid Reza has said in the assessment of this verse and the objections that are raised against it in the modern era. I just read it, no judgment, what he says. He says, some of those who are fascinated by the Western culture criticize our religious permissibility of beating rebellious wives, but they have no problem with a wife mistreating, subduing, and humiliating the husband who's supposed to be the manager of the home. I wonder what solution they have for dealing with such women. Perhaps they imagine that the law is about the weak, pious, and well-mannered lady who's oppressed under the strong claws of a vicious man who feeds his whip with the meat of the women and sucks her blood ruthlessly. They think that this is what God has permitted, and there is no sin for such behavior with one's wife. But God is far from permitting such oppression and being pleased with it. But what great calamity shall occur if a pious man disciplines his wife, who arrogantly disobeys and shirks her duties with a toothbrush, sawak, or a lenient strike? If their soft temperament cannot accept this, then perhaps it has softened so much that it has totally disappeared. But there are many leading figures of scholarship and politics in the West who beat their wives without any justification. We are dealing with a necessity which cannot be denied or eliminated, but must be satisfied in a proper way. When even the strong supporters of feminism have no substitute for such treatment, how can one condemn its appearance in a religion that is meant for all classes of people, including uneducated Bedouins and uncivilized nomads? Now, there are other views about فَضْرِبُوهُنَّ, which some commentators have mentioned, which are totally unfounded. Like, for example, some say that اضربوهن means to distance yourself from them. Why? Because in other verses of the Quran, for example, we have ضرب في الأرض means he traveled in the land. وآخرون يضربون في الأرض يبتغون من فضل الله. Or إذا ضربتم في الأرض, when you travel in the earth. So here اضربوهن means to travel away from them, keep away from them. Now, these are certain justifications. First of all, no commentator, except in the modern era where these things have become so in trend, has ever said this, and no narration supports this view. And secondly, we know that in Arabic and in any other language, prefixes, suffixes change the meaning of the term. ضربوا in one thing is one thing, ضربوا في الأرض is another thing. So this fi, which comes at the end, changes the meaning of ضرب. And we know, for example, رغب إلى means he inclined towards it, and رغب عن means he inclined away from it. So without considering these things, we cannot give a new meaning to a term which does not accept it. Just the end of the verse, فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيًّا كَبِيرًا. And just a couple of other matters, inshallah, We will discuss them in our next session. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.